Hey everybody, this is Crash Course, and today we'll be talking about an amazing book, which was totally never made into a movie, Ender's Game.
We'll talk about prominent themes in the book and really get to the bottom of what it's about. Now, let's get into some old science fiction. The story follows Ender Wiggins, a child who happens to be the third child in a family of geniuses. His brother Peter is a complete sadist, and his sister Valerie is too nice for her own good.
As a result, neither of them get selected to Battle School, which is like Fight Club for kids, Space Edition.
In all seriousness, Battle School is a training program for future military commanders in order to prepare the human race for war against the Buggers, an alien race that has attacked once before. Ender is the last one in his school to have the monitor that helps them pick candidates for the school be removed, and even after it is, Peter and other kids bully him relentlessly. Ender has to hurt a bully pretty bad before he's left alone. Eventually, Colonel Graff picks him up to take him to Battle School. From the start of his journey in Battle School, Graff and the other leaders isolate Ender. Despite this, Ender becomes a genius at the school's war game and has a meteoric rise through the ranks. As a result, the antagonism that Ender has faced his entire life continues. His unconventional thinking leads him to go farther in another simulation game provided to the students than anyone has ever done before, and the leadership is keenly aware of it. Ender gets sucked into the mind game, and as a result, he's thoroughly depressed. The teachers let Valentine write Ender a letter, and as a result, he's able to put himself back together and continue on in both games. After a particularly humiliating victory that Ender has over a former commander, the commander attacks Ender in the shower, and Ender ends up killing him. At this point, he's graduated early from Battle School to Command School. Before he leaves, he meets Valentine one last time, and they have both changed. At Command School, Ender begins practicing simulated battles versus Buggers where he controls an entire fleet, and he's able to win his final battle. Soon he realizes that the simulations were real and that he was responsible for a genocide. In her dying moments, the Queen of the Buggers shows Ender the location of the last Bugger egg, and he sets off to save their race.
Let's talk about what was going through Card's head when he wrote this. Consistent with the whole Fight Club Kids Edition thing, Card came up with the idea for the book in high school, and it's reflected in the characters. While teenagers are notorious for thinking they know everything, spoiler alert, they don't. Card aimed to have everyone see the world that he depicted from the perspective of a child. Card was also an avid military enthusiast. He noticed that in times of war, children are consistently thrown into deadly war games. While games are a prevalent theme in the book, the perception of reality versus what is a game and what is real is consistent with the childlike lens from which we see Ender's world.
The first major theme in the book looks at what games really are. Games are essentially the lens through which the events of the book occur. The games always appear to have a clear winner and loser, but the true purpose of the game is always obscured, and Ender isn't able to put this together until the end of the book. As the story progresses, the line between game and reality blurs further and further, starting with the clear-cut Buggers vs. Astronauts with Peter and Ender, and eventually progressing to a war game that turns out to be in reality a genocide.
The mind game that Ender plays with the giant is the primary example of how games become a way to interpret reality. When Ender kills the giant, the game changes completely and starts preying on Ender's insecurities. The game evolves to simply reflect Ender's state of mind, and though Ender may feel that it's only a game, in reality it's a tool that helps him understand his own weaknesses.
The line is borderline non-existent when Ender commands the invasion under the guise of simulation training. The game results in Ender barely sleeping or eating, and he is forced to treat his friends terribly. Ender eventually realizes that he must make brazen moves in order to end the games, because he hates what it's doing to him. When he discovers that he led the invasion that wiped out the Buggers, he is distraught, as he never would have done it had he known the reality of the situation. At this point, Ender does not know how he can discern games from reality, as playing a game can affect his life, and possibly even be his life. Another big theme that we see consistently throughout the entire book is empathy. Being able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes seems like a surefire way to be a good person, but Ender manages to ruin even that by using it to defeat everybody else around him. At the very least, you gotta give the guy points for creativity. Compassion underpins all of Ender's actions. It is his biggest strength, and his being able to understand the enemy enables him to defeat them absolutely. When Ender is transferred into Bonzo's army, Bonzo immediately judges him for being underage, determines him to be useless, and lambasts him in front of the entire army. Ender quickly realizes that his relationship with Bonzo is not going to change, and that Bonzo will antagonize him forever. He is able to quickly put together Bonzo's leadership style and thought process through observation, and is able to completely accept his flaws and his nature.
Ender is self-aware of this ability and says as much. In the moment when I truly understand my enemy, understand him well enough to defeat him, then in that very moment I also love him. I think it's impossible to really understand somebody, what they want, what they believe, and not love them the same way they love themselves.
During his conversation with Valentine before leaving for command school, Ender explains to his sister why he's been so depressed. Thanks to his incredible empathy, he's able to understand his enemies and other people around him better than anybody else, which is how he can read them completely. The flip side of being the most understanding person in the world is that he ends up loving his enemies, and as a result, he feels tremendous pain when they force conflict on him and he must hurt them. Time and time again, with bullies at school, with Bonzo, and with the buggers that he decimates, Ender faces intense emotional trauma and guilt because he understands the perspective of his enemy, and it hurts him to hurt them. Finally, an aspect of expectations versus reality is used in the form of allegiances. Throughout the book, who is a friend and who is a foe is hard to tell, and allegiances are constantly murky. At the start of the book, on the flight to battle school, Graf helps Ender, praising him for being the only one to think about zero gravity.
There's only one kid on this launch with any brains at all, and that's Ender Wiggins. Take a good look at him, little boys. He's going to be a commander when you're still in diapers.
Graf may appear to be a friend. Friends compliment each other, acknowledge each other's success. However, Ender immediately picks up on the sublying implications of Graf's actions. While he was giving Ender the facade of friendship, really he appears to be an enemy, as being praised by the commanding officer will cause the rest of Ender's peers to resent him. However, Ender doesn't know that Graf is intentionally doing this in Ender's best interests. In an Inception-like twist, Graf is a bona fide triple agent. Ender is able to use his critical thinking to determine the meaning of the situation which he's been placed in, but without knowing everything, even he is unable to understand what is truly going on. Another example of how the nature of a relationship, friend or enemy, is unclear is Ender's tutelage under Mazer Rackham. Mazer immediately behaves like an enemy, confining Ender to his room. Once they converse, he states he is as much.
I am your enemy, the first one you've ever had that was smarter than you. There is no teacher but the enemy.
Mazer presents himself as the enemy, striking Ender, challenging him every day in simulation battles, and constantly berating and belittling him for his mistakes. Ender grows to hate him because he would make Ender feel bad and appears to be out to get him. In reality, Mazer is going extremely hard on Ender in order to make sure he's completely prepared both emotionally and mentally for the task ahead of him. Given the information he has, Ender cannot determine that Mazer is actually an ally to him. Throughout the book, depending on what angle you look at it from, or what information you have, the concept of enemies or allies can be very fluid, and many characters manage to be both at the same time. There are no clear distinctions, and this is a lesson that Card attempts to emphasize as much as possible. Overall, what's the message that should be taken from the various themes in the book? Putting together the impact of games, being empathetic, and understanding appearance versus reality, it's clear that the author is trying to convey that there is no cut and dry, correct interpretation of the world around us. Depending on the context of your information and the angle from which you view it, things can always be seen in a different light. Putting ourselves in other people's shoes and evaluating all possible meanings of actions that people around us take is extremely important to develop a nuanced understanding of the world around us. And even then, we must always think critically as to what information we could possibly be missing. Ender's Game teaches a valuable lesson. Consider everything you know, everything you might not know. There is never a singular correct answer for a given problem.
As said by Valerie, nobody controls his own life, Ender. The best you can do is choose to fill in the roles given to you by good people, by people who love you.